Do you wanna know what's going round? See what's the talk of the town on Real Talk on the radio today.
And welcome to Real Talk 97.5 FM. Special shout out to Michael Rawlings for creating that little jingle. We're working on more, as you guys know. Back to School Bash is Saturday, July 20th from 3 to 9 o'clock. That is a really cool event. If you have never gone, you should go check it out. They do a great job. There's bounce houses, laser tag, rock climbing wall, bungee jump, kids activities, vendor booths, live music, dance performances, food trucks, free giveaways, big trucks for the kids to look at with the police department and the fire department here in the greater city of Northport, Florida. Glow foam party also. It's just going to be a great event. The Back to School Bash, Saturday, July 20th from 3 to 9 o'clock over at the City Hall area. And you would check it out. There'll be plenty of signs there. And appreciate you guys spreading the word about that. Also, there is another meeting tonight for the United Tour, and that's going to be held at the Morgan Center. It starts at 6 o'clock. It's a great opportunity for you, the citizens, to listen to an update on the city, but also have an open Q&A dialogue with not only our city manager, Jerome Fletcher, but the entire staff usually shows up and they do the Q&A right there. So if you've got direct questions, you can ask those in a great forum. And I know there are groups out there that talk about transparency. I'm going to kick that can down the road because they kick so many other things down the road, like kicking people out of their group. So I'm not trying to kick people out of my group. I'm trying to get you included into Real Talk Radio, which is the voice of the citizens. And it's really here for you. It is not here for anyone else. The Q&As that take place with a lot of the guests go on and on until people are done. So please kick anyone to the curb that is telling you that the city is not trying to have a open dialogue all the time, and learn for yourself. Get involved with the city, get involved with the city formats, join some groups that are within the city. There's some really good groups out there that need support, and it's citizens input that is of true value to those groups, and they support local government. So those two things are happening tonight. Please share the word out there about those groups. And I will introduce my very special guest and good friend, Commissioner Phil Stokes. How you doing, buddy?
Very good, John. Good to see you.
Had a lot of intro there, but a lot of activity happened out there with the Northport Forward United Tour and also the Back to School Bash. So a lot of things happening this time of year to get things going. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well.
So what's happening in Northport that you think you need to get off your chest to the citizens of Northport?
Oh, I mean, probably the most pressing thing, I think that's right in front of us is the charter amendment referendum that's coming up in November. And I think, it's for the city at large, for all of us, it is an important time for our city, because the ability for us to be able to borrow money and leverage the opportunity to really address the infrastructure that for so long has been kicked, as you said, kicked down the road. We have over 64 water structures and bridges. We have canals. We have water and sewer that we need to expand throughout the city. We have so many projects that we just don't have the money in our pockets for, but that we have the ability to borrow for, move up the timetable on those projects, and lock in costs. And it's just so critical that we do it. Our citizens have been asking for years and years and years to address this infrastructure issue, and this is a way to do it. It's a way to be more fiscally responsible than we've been in the past by utilizing the tool that every other municipality and county in the state has. And I think it'll be hopefully one that with education and conversation and dialogue, come November, hopefully the citizens will embrace.
So I'm going to kind of hit this direct real quick because I know that Robin is ready to go. A lot of the other listeners are ready to go with questions, but keeping this real basic, why do citizens need to vote yes for the referendum?
Well, for all of us, how many times, do each of us individually or in our businesses look at opportunity and the chance to do things or to meet needs, necessities, wants that we can't simply reach in our pocketbook for? We all borrow money typically to acquire a home. You know, how could we do it if we had to pay cash for it? And in a simplified form, that's sort of the philosophy. The reason why people should support this, I think, is that for too long we've waited. Price Boulevard's a perfect example. I mean, look at how expensive this project has turned out to be because of all the years of neglect and pushing it down the road. These big projects cost a fortune, and it's not easy to simply write a check for them. If we were to do that by raising taxes, the burden would fall on all of us who live here in the city now, on the backs of us. Yet much of this is going to help support the growth of the city as we go forward. So why shouldn't future generations of citizens and businesses help carry that cost? And the ability to borrow gives us that. This referendum has nothing to do with using proper taxes to pay for loans or debt in order to rebuild our infrastructure. There are revenue streams within our district that have that ability: utilities, road and drainage, and they every year dedicate millions of dollars to projects, but it doesn't nearly make a dent. And if they had the ability to leverage a little bit and borrow within their means, they can only borrow what they can afford to pay the interest and principal on, but it would allow us to get more than one water structure a year redone. It would allow us to lock in costs on things that every year go up because of inflation. So all these are good reasons why the citizens should hopefully trust us with this tool. And the process is open. It's transparent. Every project still requires public hearings, approval by commission. It'll be built into our budgeting process. There'll be a rigid debt management policy with guidelines as to how and what we borrow for. So I think that for all those reasons, we should be able to do this because ultimately it's going to be more economically or fiscally responsible for our citizens. And that's what they ask of us. They want us to be good stewards of their tax dollars. This would help us do it.
But I'm kind of going to layer this for a second because I think we have to start from some really basic stuff. There are some grants out there that we would like to take advantage of with Warren Springs and different things like that, and different opportunities throughout the city. Would borrowing money and being able to do some of these projects like those where you might pick up a $3 or $4 million grant towards Warmill Springs or other projects like that. Would this give us that flexibility to work that without tapping our reserves?
Absolutely. I mean, you heard a month and a half back, the Alliance came and made a presentation to the City Commission and explained just that. There are matching grants. If we put up X dollars, they match them. There are reimbursement grants out there for all sorts of things, from mineral springs to infrastructure related projects.
Yep.
There's just a whole host of financing flexibilities that go along with having this borrowing ability, and we can't take advantage of some of them now. We just can't, and we lose out on millions and millions of dollars of grant money because we can't do that, because much of it involves us putting money up front and then getting reimbursed. So
we can't borrow money right now, correct?
that is correct.
All right, so we're already,
Without a
as
referendum.
I kind of look at this as in, let's look at the home, let's look at our household. It's sort of like saying at your household, you're going to be cash driven, but you're not going to have credit cards. You're not going to have a line of credit. You're not going to have any of those things, but you're going to be strictly cash driven. While that is all well and good to a certain degree, households don't really nationwide operate at cash flow driven expenditures, do they, Phil?
No, I mean, and that's a good thing and it's a bad thing, because, to play devil's advocate, people will say, well, this country is overloaded with debt. Consumer debt
Sure.
is not a good thing. But a good example, if you're driving an old vehicle that you have to pump a couple of $1,000s a year into to keep it on the road and keep it dependable, and you have the opportunity to go replace that vehicle with a new vehicle for which your monthly payments are going to be equal to or possibly even less than what you're pumping into that old car, and you don't have to worry that it's going to break down, you're going to miss work, you're going to miss appointments, it makes sense to borrow for that. Yet you don't have the money to write a check for $30,000 or $40,000 for a new car these days. So instead, you make that $300 a month payment, and $300 a month times 12 is $4,000 a year. Well, if you're spending that on repairs and everything else on that old, beater, it's almost the same thing, but you're that much more efficient. And you can translate this into a lot of things. Opportunity for a small business owner who sees a project before them that, is a great opportunity, but they don't have the extra couple of part-time or full-time employees or the money to buy the materials. And in order to be able to do that project and put that bid out there, if they had the ability to borrow and they go to their local bank and get the money up front to hire a couple people and buy materials, they can get that job done in the time frame that the contractor wants or whoever's hiring you. And it's not a perfect analogy, but you can translate it to the same situation the city's in.
But we went through that, and the citizens of our area and south of us have been going through these same scenarios where cash is kind of king to get you going, but that secondary, oh my gosh, I'm going to get with SBA, get that loan. I'm going to get that low interest rate to carry, get the project done, and then have that low interest payment that's due to the SBA to take care of the rebuilding of my house. Now, if you use that same analogy and you apply that across the board, the city does not have that in its tool bag. I think that we have to talk about how our city has been operating with an empty tool bag. we have limited access to borrowing power since our inception because we're 65 years old and we've now gone 65 years of life with our city not being able to have borrowing power. Most of us bought a house in our 30s and we already felt the difference in borrowing power, whether it was 18% interest rate. Sorry to say, you got the lower cost of the home at 18%, but reverse that. We've gone through some economic growth, and we had the opportunity to still borrow money at a much lesser rate. So all these things do relatively cross over to the fact that your home is no different than what the city has to operate. And really telling the city no is telling yourself no on how you would manage your asset, your money, and really strategically play your best play at home. Now, the beauty in that, and I'm going to throw this back at you, Phil, is that when you qualify for a home equity line of credit, the first thing that happens when you qualify is there's restrictions and limitations. And the same thing is being asked for within the same package, isn't it, Phil?
Of course it is. Of course it is. You know, the city highly values its bond rating, and in any lender's borrower situation, lenders are going to look at your ability to pay. They're going to look at your debt to equity ratios. They're going to look at a whole host of things, and that's one of the checks and balances that keeps this in line. Revenue bonding, for people who maybe, to back up a little, you know, there are two types of borrowing. There are these general obligation bonds where by law a municipality is required to ask for permission from the citizens through a referendum. That is statewide. That is an absolute mandate. And the city, if it borrows under general obligation bonds, pledges its good faith and credit and any resources it has, including property taxes, to pay for those general obligation bonds. Revenue bonds are more targeted towards revenue streams, and there has to be the ability to pay that debt. And you have to clearly delineate how those loans will be paid back with interest over a period of time. And so, you know, there's a real strong structure there. It's not a matter of here's a blank checkbook, you could have at it. It just doesn't work that way. And I wanted to jump back a little to one thing, you know, that we haven't addressed. You know, we talk about infrastructure projects, but a big portion of this ask is to give us the capability to address disasters and or imminent infrastructure failure. You know, with 64 water structures well into their past useful lives, you know, not long after the hurricane, you know, we found part of Price caving in. I mean, there are infrastructure issues we can have that would seriously impact our citizens' ability to move around, get to work, and to enjoy the basic services they've grown accustomed to. If the city had to go out and ask the citizens in a referendum, which can take, you know, better part of a year. I mean, it's not an easy thing, and it's an expensive thing to do. And some asks, you know, fall into election cycles. You're talking about extended periods of time. You know, when our hurricane hit, we were very fortunate. In addition to our legally mandated 20% reserves, we had a pretty good kitty of money sitting there. And we had over $60 million worth of debris removal that we were able to address pretty quickly, you know, through our excess reserves. Had those fund balances not been there, we would have perhaps been very much like some other cities south of us who sat with debris, mountains of debris, for months on end. And people would say, what's wrong with this city government? Why can't they clear the roads? Why can't they clear this stuff away? So there's much more than just, oh, we're going to spend money to build this or build that or do something new. This is really the ability to have a tool that's going to help us in an important situation, whether it be a disaster, a hurricane, or whether it be a failure of some portion of our infrastructure. So, there is that goes along with this ask.
Well, and there is something there. I like the guardrails up. I don't have a problem with the guardrails because you always have to start somewhere with anything where you're asking more responsibility. As parents, we actually teach this to our kids anyway. Don't tell me you want a $27,000 car, because you're getting your first car ever. Um, I remember getting my first car and I paid for it. I did all the work on it. My mom used to tell me all the time, you tear it all the way down and you paid for it. Why are you tearing it apart? Because I was learning. I still do that stuff today. I still can work on cars. All those types of things, though, we're asking now because we've been working behind the scenes. The staff has been managing with cash flow, and I still say we kicked this can down the road so far. I don't even know how we've been blessed to manage it like we have, because it's tough enough to run your household with all of the abilities to change and jockey numbers and slide things here, slide things there. And that's when we're talking about the working class of our community, they are 100% grinding at that right now. They are 100% grinding at that. And if they didn't have, or if there is a family out there that doesn't have the capability of borrowing to shift that, that I can't imagine the stress that is under the citizens right now with all of that. But couple that with a city that has gone through a massive hurricane, spent a massive load of money to get the city back to right. There's still projects out there from Hurricane Ian that are not complete. We still have funding out from the federal government that has not been paid to us, and we're still managing to move our city our city forward in all the needs that the citizens ask for every single day. And yet, if we don't provide a way to borrow, aren't we kind of setting ourselves as a city up for failure, and then kind of shooting from the hip from the back, like, hey, now we're not asking, now we're telling you we have to have this. So it's kind of preemptive too, isn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's not that we're setting ourselves up for failure. If we don't have that tool, it's that what's going to happen is the city's going to have to react to an emergency with the means that they have at their disposal. And some of that involves perhaps service cutbacks. It involves, you know, utilizing funds in a way that wouldn't be as efficient. One thing sacrificed for the other. It would also mean that in some cases things would wait. We just wouldn't be able to do it. I mean, the reality is, if a major bridge or water structure failed and we didn't have the money to jump right on it and go to work on it, what would happen? Cars would be detoured, roads would be closed down. There would be issues. Again, it's one, protecting from the disasters and the imminent failures. And the other aspect is being able to strategically plan to address our infrastructure in a proactive way before we have those failures. And that's an important thing. I mean, I think, it's to sit and talk in broad generalities sometimes is tough to do about this subject. I'm hoping that over the next 4 months, citizens ask a lot of questions and try to process this and translate it into a perspective that they understand from their own experience, and where they're nervous about, control, and they're nervous about commission ability to spend money in an irresponsible way. I think the more conversations that go on, the better opportunity there'll be for people to see that our interests are aligned with theirs. We want to spend these dollars properly. We've been trying to do that for years, 5 years with no millage rate tax increase. We've tried to spend our dollars as frugally and as intelligently and as strategically as possible. Having this ability will be no different. And I think that whole education process will go a long way towards people understanding that this is a pretty reasonable ask. And people say, well, just because everyone else does it, we shouldn't do it. If that isn't a good argument, I would say that on its surface it isn't, but in a sense it is, because you really need the ability to be financially responsible and be good stewards. This is an important tool in order for us to do it. So I'm really hopeful that people will not see this as a confrontational issue, but more as one that they just need to make sure that we got our heads screwed on right, and that we're doing this in the right way. And so, we'll see. It'll be an interesting 4 months.
Well, the next 4 months, they're really important for people to understand. They really are. And we need to have we need to have the ability to do this with restraint. The other side of it, it doesn't change the vote at all. It's still going to be 3 commissioners saying yes to the projects, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes, every project would have to come. I mean, any borrowing has to come before the commission. There'll be, I believe, 2. We put in the ordinance 2 public hearings. No special meetings can be called to incur debt, so that we do have a process and proper notice and transparency. Our citizens, there's a group that do a pretty good job of making their voices heard. And despite how some people might feel we don't listen, we do listen. And it affects how we do things. And this will be no different. This will be no different. I mean, if a commission, whether it be ours or a future commission, were to come up with a project that they wanted to spend money on, that the citizens had a large outcry over and said, Jesus, this is like, what are you guys thinking? I mean, commissions think about that. They just don't say, we're just going to go do whatever we want. There are consequences to that, as there are now, even before our ability to borrow. So, to think that this is going to be just we're handing the keys to the kingdom over is really not fair. It's not a fair assessment. This is just a really, really important tool that will help us be better at what we do and be more fiscally responsible and be able to be more creative in the way we maximize our tax dollars to get the biggest bang for our buck. That's what this is all about.
As far as the referendum and where you stand, as you've reviewed it right now, do you feel comfortable with it as it reads?
Yeah, I think, when the first draft of you only have 75 words you can put into the actual ballot language, which is quite restrictive. But the ordinance is where a lot of the meat is. And in the first drafts, obviously I think people can wrap their heads around the need to have available funds for disasters and imminent infrastructure failures. When you talk about public safety and health, infrastructure projects like that, people are always looking for more definition. What specific projects are you talking about? Could that mean anything? And I think we tried to do a good job listening to people who critiqued that piece of the ask and tightened up the language as best we could. Um, we put a cap of 15 million in there, and you know that for many projects would be insufficient, probably, depending on the particular project. But it was a place to start. It was a number that's controllable. And if you look at the amount of money that road and drainage, that utilities, that fire rescue have, um, and that they spend on capital projects each year, the ability to service debt, pay interest and principal up to a borrowing of that amount is reasonable. To turn around and say you want to borrow 30 million or $50 million a project, I don't think we would be able to afford that. And I think that's what people need to focus on a little too, is the ability of us to have or to utilize the revenue streams we have available to do this with. Again, none of this ask has to do with property tax. The general fund, which is made up predominantly of property taxes, will not be used. That's not what we're asking for here. So we're talking about user fees. We're talking about other revenue streams in the city to pay for these, whatever debt might be incurred and whatever borrowing might be incurred. So, I think that there's really a lot of good language in this ordinance that should give people comfort. And then before we get to November, I believe September, we've got a workshop on the debt management policy. That will go through a lot of crunching. It's been drafted by staff. It has not been totally vetted by outside financial experts, and hasn't really received a tremendous amount of input from commission or the citizens. When we finish with all that, we'll come up with a good, tight debt management policy that will be adopted prior to the November election, so that in the event the referendum passes, that will immediately kick in, and there won't be any window whereby we have borrowing ability but no debt management guardrails or policies in place. So that will all be done in advance.
Do you think with the borrowing ability and $15 million per, do you think with that setup, do you think the citizens are going to see more activity for this usage? Meaning, will we see more projects started because they'll be able to be managed differently financially?
Yes. I mean, every year, if people, again, it's pretty dry stuff for a lot of people, but if you go through the CIP, the capital improvement project list, and you see that the average water structure is $4 to $5 million and going up with the cost of, with inflation. We only do 1 to 2 a year. And we have 64 of them. Picture how many years, and they're all pretty much beyond their useful lifetimes. So if we could do 3 or 4 a year, I mean, we probably couldn't do much more than that because we don't have the staff and the oversight to do it. And there are other things, you don't want to throw all your borrowing dollars at one thing. You want to try to get your best bang for your buck. There are priorities everywhere. Over the 15, 20-year period, there's close to $2 billion of needs. We couldn't possibly borrow that much money to meet those needs all at one time. They're going to have to be strategically planned and prioritized. So, I think that people would see more activity in the critical infrastructure areas. Water and sewer is another good example. I mean, it'd take 300 years for everybody to have water and sewer.
They didn't say 300 at the last meeting. He actually said 900.
Yeah, I mean, God forbid we have a major problem with sewage in our city. It could be catastrophic if regulatory groups came in and started to mandate to the city. we are so behind in our ability to do that. We have God knows how many septic systems out there that are leaching. And we, with all the concern people showed for Mineral Springs and the concerns over possible development in and around the springs on the 60 acres. And again, I get that the properties around Mineral Springs are predominantly unincorporated Sarasota County. Those septic systems are aged. The wells suck water out of the aquifer. It is not good for the environment, and yet we have such a limited ability to service that infrastructure need. If we had borrowing ability within our ability to pay for it,
Yep.
we could do it. And then as people get hooked up, there are reimbursements, and there are all kinds of government monies for water and sewer and infrastructure, all kinds of things that are above my pay grade that staff is aware of that we would be able to get reimbursement for that we can't because we can't put the money up front. We can't make those kinds of investments and then look for the grant monies that are there. So I think people would see a significant improvement and responsiveness to the infrastructure needs. And let's face it, if every survey we've done, the citizens of the city have said as their highest priority, address our infrastructure, address the roads, address the water sewer, address the water structures, the canals, okay, the culverts, all these things that they want us and past, present, and future commissions to address.
And what's it take?
Help us do.
What's it take?
I'm
money.
sorry?
It takes money.
Takes money.
It takes money to do everything that every citizen wants in this city has to be money driven. It is, I'm sorry, it is money driven. I don't care if it's come out and dig my ditch. It costs money to dig your ditch out. And it costs money to maintain all these things. And the referendum is going to help create another avenue for actually providing better service. And I don't want to say service because I know for a fact we are perfect service driven. Blah, blah, blah. Perfect service driven. I know that within city walls because they're 100% trying to provide the ultimate experience with their hands tied behind their back, maybe software, maybe different things. This is just another component of that. And while I agree with you, I think this has to be looked at. And there has to be some restraints going in. And I don't think there's actually anybody who hasn't agreed with that. And because it's the most important part is the start, and you gain trust throughout. And other cities have had to do that. They're all doing it. I would dare say that none of them want to be in the position that we're in right now. If you went out and took a survey and said, other than I'll say this, we are not in debt. We're not doing those things, but we could use the tool to manage ourselves better. So we're not digging ourselves a deep hole. Other cities may do that. We're not asking for that, right? Correct?
Correct.
And then can you, Robin San Vicente would like to know, can you please explain the prior to October 1st, 2025 that's within the document?
It's possible for you to bring up, John, so I can see the whole paragraph there. I saw her comment and I just need to see how it's referenced. I don't know if you can find that portion of it.
Robin, can you tell me what line that is? I want to make sure I pull it up for Phil. And those of you who are listening on the radio, page 3, got it. We are actually showing this presentation live on Real Talk 97.5 FM on my Facebook page. So if you go to Facebook and you go up and check out the corner where the magnifying glass is, and you type in Real Talk 97.5, you'll see my ugly mug there and my logo. Just click on it and you'll be able to watch throughout. I do want to say one other thing I forgot at the beginning of the show. Thoughts and prayers out to former President Donald Trump and the biggest part of that whole event was the father who got killed and the two who were critical. They are not forgotten. I am really upset by that whole thing. But I got to tell you, the protection that was there was horrid. They need to do a better job. Yeah, I am speaking certainly for myself and not Phil when I say this, and not the city of Northport, that whoever designed that security should be fired yesterday. They have no business in security. It was kindergarten-esque. Uh, I'm not into security, not on anything about it, but anyone with the basic common sense would not have allowed that to happen. And that's all I'm going to say on the topic. I'm going to go to line 118, and we'll check this out. 118, right there. Is that big enough for you, Phil?
Yeah, let me just read it.
Read it out loud if you want to.
Okay, limitations on debt. City's authority to address safety debts. Prior to October 25th, the 1st, 2025, the principal indebtedness obligation incurred by the city to address safety or public health should be in a principal amount. Okay, it is. So basically, between November, assuming this referendum passes, from November of 24 until October 1st, 25, the principal indebtedness, okay, would not exceed $15 million per project. And it says that, so then that triggers the once a year adjustment to that principal borrowing ability, that index that each year would adjust that 15 million upwards, is effective on the October 1st forward, October 1st, 25. That's sort of what that's referring to. That prior to that date, the 15 million holds in place as of October 1st, 2025, which is the beginning of the new fiscal year. It would be adjusted by the index, and that's spoken to elsewhere in the ordinance. I don't know, hopefully that explains it. If not, I can, when I see Robin, I can go into a little more depth, but that's all that's referring to.
Does that make sense, Robin? The wording is, she says the
Yeah.
wording in it, it's vague.
Yep. Yeah.
So
I mean,
that would be one of those topics that I would definitely bring up at the first reading. Is that something that we'll highlight now, Phil?
Yeah, actually, what we'll do is I'll make sure that staff, we spend a little time working through that language for everybody on the second reading when it comes back to us, because we've had our first reading. But this way, it can be better understood and taken in context with that whole section so people can understand. This language was written very carefully by, our legal folks and financial folks. So, this ordinance is not something that, us mere mortal commissioners want to wordsmith too much, but there's still the necessity for explanation and understanding. Because as people saw in the last meeting or two, we struggled with some of the language, trying to understand how things were worded and why they were worded the way they were. So, we'll create some more clarity for that. See the way it says in number 2, little 2, beginning, hold that, bring it down on 7, beginning October 125, and each October 1 thereafter, the maximum principal amount of indebtedness or obligation the city may occur shall be adjusted to reflect the percentage change in the engineering news and record, the ENR, construction cost index, by using the most recent available information. So that's what those two tie together to.
How about number 3?
The city commission shall not approve the issuance of this debt through an emergency ordinance. That was something we spoke about. We did not want, we did not think it was smart for there to be an emergency meeting or ordinance by which we could incur debt. The reality is it's even though that's in there, that isn't even possible from a practical standpoint. No lender would loan money to a municipality based on an emergency meeting that wasn't properly processed, so to speak. I mean, think about it. It's like if you ran in and said to to a lender on a mortgage, hey, look, my builder told me I can close next week. Give me the money. They're not going to do that. They have processes. So the truth is, we really would never be able to do that from a practical standpoint. But it was a discussion point, and it was important to put it in there so that it sends a message to our citizens that we're not going to try to pull a fast one. We're not going to try without proper transparency and inclusiveness, run out and hold a meeting and approve debt and saddle the city with an obligation. I know there's a huge degree of distrust, and I've said it before, that I don't think this is an issue of trust, but I appreciate that distrust exists, and with good reason. When you look around the country and the world, and people look at their governments and they question some of the decisions that are made, it's no doubt people question. But here on this local level, our citizens are a lot more closer to us and to what happens. We are you. We are no different. All we did was run for office and get elected, and we're trying to make decisions that are in the best interest of all of us. Smart decisions with the guidance of our professional staff, who are highly talented experts in their fields, and we want to do the right things. I think we've been extremely fiscally responsible over the last handful of years, and really, I think, showed that we are good stewards of the citizens' tax dollars. So I'm hoping people feel the same way when it comes to this.
Well, and Robin said that one paragraph is talking about the principal indebtedness, and the other paragraph is talking about the maximum. It definitely needs tweaking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We all have to remember when we talk about a debt cap of 15 million, it is the principal portion. The interest, the cost of money that's attached varies. It can be discounted and paid early. Interest rates, depending on the type of borrowing you do, can change. So, you can't build into a document like this what the total cost of a project would be inclusive of interest. What you do is you set a principal cap, bearing in mind that there's a cost of money to it, and the ability to borrow that money is predicated on your ability not just to pay the principal back, but the interest as well. So, that's all factored into how much you can borrow. And that's why I say it's for many things, that would be a high cap. To borrow a couple of water structures, we have to, if it's $4 to $5 million, we're going to borrow for them. There's going to be cost of money attached to them as well. And you have to factor that in.
So I'm going to ask a question because I believe that this is or should be looked at as a living document, ever changing, adapting to. I know that we're going to go through first and second readings. I also realize that the reality of this is there's going to have to be some changes made and adjusted for. How streamlined is our adjustment capability? Let's go back to that paragraph that Robin was pointing out at 118. If that were to go through the first reading and the second reading, and you guys got on the other side of that window and you said, well, wait a minute, can you tell me what the process is for adjusting that paragraph, or do we have to go completely back through? Because if we have to go back through this, it's insane. I don't want to have to.
You have three pieces to this overall ask. You have the ballot language, which is actually going to translate into the language that goes into the charter amendment. To change charter amendment obviously requires a vote of the citizens of our city. The ordinance, ordinance for this, the ordinance in front of us here on the screen, is the same as any other ordinance. Commissions can revisit it. It has to go through its first and second readings. It has to be vetted. It has to be transparent. And there is the availability over a period of a handful of months to adjust or modify an ordinance, to replace it or whatever. And that gives us that flexibility. I mean, between up until the first reading, there has been a lot of input. Between first and second, there may be some additional tweaking. But
Right.
my guess is we're pretty close to having it the way we need it. I think much of people's concern over some of the language and understanding, because I've had people say, I don't understand all this yet. I don't know what they mean by this. I don't know what they mean by that. I don't understand what this says. I think once we've thoroughly explained all that, people will get comfortable with this ordinance. This is an incredibly well put together ordinance. It's not to say it wouldn't be subject to change at some point. I would hope it wouldn't in a dramatic sense or in a significant sense, because a lot of work on the part of the experts went into this language. It's a lot. We're no different than citizens in that it's been a hurdle for us to wrap our heads around some of the language in here and understand what's meant by some of this terminology. I have a financial background and I struggled with some of it too. And I think our citizens, as they get more knowledgeable over the months, those who are interested in this will come to understand all this language and what it means and how it's understood, and that this isn't just random words put together. And I think that will help. Then there's the third piece of this, which is the debt management policy. And that's a policy which is even more flexible in its ability to be modified and tweaked to account for things that we haven't yet thought of. There may well be some additional guardrails that come down the road that we think, gee, we should do this, we should add that. And that's something you can build into a policy a whole lot easier.
So this is a living document, and you hope not to change too much of it. But once it gets through, there isn't a long drawn out process of change. It can be what I'm trying to get to is that if there is something that creates an issue with the reading that's there,
Mm-hmm.
and it involves citizenry, okay, and I'm not picking on any one part. I think anything that's like this has to have some adaptivity to it. Have we given ourselves the ability to count on our commission to add language or adjust for language without having to go back through first and second reading?
No. Once this ordinance is passed, in order to change the ordinance, you have to go back through the ordinance process. And the citizens want that. Otherwise, commissions could just indiscriminately make changes to things that were properly vetted with first and second readings and transparency. That would be the last thing any citizen would want, is for commission to simply be able to go in and make a change to an ordinance. I mean, that would be hard if you can't do it.
Had to ask
for ordinances to change.
Here's the funny thing: you have to ask the questions, no matter how scared you are of the answer. And citizens who are out here who are reading this, the Robins of the world, who are going through it and tearing it apart and putting time and energy into it, there is something to be said about attentiveness to detail.
That's right. And look at what happened. There was a reference to, in the ordinance, it didn't specifically address general obligation bonds up at the top initially, and it talked about the utilization of property tax. And while it was implied, it wasn't specified. And it was something that Commissioner McDowell and I both felt strongly about. and 4 out of the 5 commissioners felt likewise after discussion, and that was added to the ordinance. And I think if we find going into second reading there's something that everyone feels equally strong about, then that'll be done as well. I have to say and reiterate, though, this language is put together by lawyers in a very carefully worded way. This is not just, to have layman wordsmith something can be a problem. However, to add some language of clarification, a list of definitions, which would be tremendously helpful, and city manager and I have discussed it, and I believe we'll see some of that. I think those are all good things. So Robin's concern, and I'm sure it's shared by many, that some of this language is not clearly understood and defined. And I think therein lies an opportunity between now and when this is finalized to add some of that. So, you want this to be as good a document as possible. While most documents are living documents, you do not want an ordinance, any ordinance, whether it has to do with this or anything, to be done in such fashion that commissions can just make changes to them at will. If there's good reason to, that's one thing. Then they need to be properly vetted. They need to be properly noticed. They have to be they have to include proper transparency, and they have to go through first and second readings. There is a legal process by which ordinances get changed or amended or new ones get put in place. And that is an important thing that we would never want to go by the wayside. That's one of the things that citizens should take great comfort in. And a debt management policy, which will have a whole lot more detail and explanation as to how these actual borrowing decisions get made, those things are more of a policy related, and there, with proper discussions in public meetings, future commissions may have the ability to tweak and change depending on how we see. That's much more of a living document than the ordinance would be, but they all can be changed as long as they're done legally and properly.
Okay. And so Chuck English has a question. Who has the ability to amend the debt management policy, and the administration or the administration or the commission?
Commission.
I want to go back for a minute, because everybody, and not just Chuck, but other people, the administration, does our administration side of things have any power to change any of this, or does it all have to go back through commissioners?
So it all have to go to commission. I mean,
So there is
staff and city manager could never change an ordinance. They could never change a policy. All these are powers vested in the commission. Recommendations will be made. Due diligence would be done by staff, but all of it comes before commission.
And then one thing I mentioned at a commission meeting is maybe on attachment to the descriptions of exactly what is considered public health and safety.
Yeah, Robin's addressing the real feelings that she and others are having about enough detail. You can only put so much into an ordinance, but there's a lot of information that can be packaged along with this ask that will be made publicly available to people, posted on websites, handed out for people to realize the true commitment, and they will help hold commission and city government to those words. So, for instance, in the ordinance, it doesn't say specifically that the debt management policy will be adopted and in effect prior to the referendum. Yet the commission has voted on that. The commission has made that commitment known. It is in the minutes. It is a part of the overall information package for people to see. And, there are more things like that, like what she just mentioned, Robin, as well as, I think, a set of definitions regarding some of these areas. And that's something we can more talk about. I think, the more people understand the specifics of what we would borrow money for, the more
Yes.
detail they have, the better they'll understand it. I mean, that's
I-
really what Robin's asking for, and others are sharing their sentiments on. And I don't disagree. I
And
think
I
that's all part of this next 4-month education process. The better
and
we do it, the better chance we have of this passing. Because ultimately, this decision will be the citizens' decision, and it'll be incumbent upon us as a city government to do a good job educating people. The city, and it's worth noting, cannot promote this referendum. The city government itself cannot promote and encourage people to vote for this. What they can do is provide factual information and answer questions and educate. Commissioners, on the other hand, as individuals, commissioners, are allowed to promote this and to give their reasons why and to try to explain to people and encourage people to support this for many of the reasons I've said on the show already, and Jerome has said on his show, and many of the other commissioners have said all along the way so far. So people need to understand that.
well, and I will say this. I don't think there's anyone currently serving as a commissioner, or or I haven't met all of them yet, but I feel very confident none of them are opposed to this. Now the format and the first and second, well, first reading's done, but the second reading, I don't think there's anybody running on, hey, let's stop this. I think everybody realizes now. I'm going to say this out loud to anybody who's out there that knows differently. If you know of the person who is thinking differently, I'd love to talk to them because I'd like their point of view. And I'm sure everybody would like their point of view before this goes to a second reading. But
Actually, John, there is probably one or two candidates who might not feel this would be appropriate. But I will tell you that all 5 commissioners have supported this. And you know me, I don't shy away from any bloody issue. And we have had many 4-to-1 votes in the year and a half, almost 2 years that I've been on the commission. And Commissioner McDowell has always been one who has drilled down on issues and really promoted the fact that really tries to see our decisions through the eyes of the citizens. Now, I would say we all try to do that, but she has supported this referendum. And the reason is because she understands its value. She is as concerned as we all are that we do this in a fiscally responsible way with the right guidelines, with the right explanations and language. And that is a huge thing our citizens ought to take great comfort in. If this was a real split decision kind of issue, I think it would significantly diminish our ability to get the citizens to support this. But you have 5 commissioners who, regardless of what people might say about, 4 to 5 rubber stamp, we are all individuals. We all see things a little differently. We all have different expertise and experience we bring to these decisions. And yet all 5 of us support this. Our staff supports this. If you were to personally reach out to elected officials at other city and county levels, you would find everyone supports the need to do this, as long as we do it smartly and intelligently, fiscally responsibly, and open and transparent. I mean, I think that's a big tell. It really is. People should take great comfort that this commission is united in seeing the value and importance of this referendum.
Well, I just realized that we've kind of blown past the
Right.
hour, and I'm trying to get to the screen so I can get off the air because I kind of muffled that one. I didn't
You know,
even realize we've been on for over an hour
one
now.
thing, John, I'd like to make sure I get on.
Sure.
Starting, August is a down month, although this month we've got quite a bit in August coming up. But August is a down month typically for commission. Starting September, I plan on personally reserving space at Northport Library and over on Toledo Glade. Um, Once a week, if I can get the time, if I can get the room, in the evening, say 6 to 7:30 ish. I need to confirm and get with the libraries and pick the dates to make myself available every week, bouncing back and forth from library to library for folks to come. It's a town hall kind of format, which will give people the ability, but focused on this issue. If someone asks questions other than the referendum, I'm certainly not going to ignore it, but I would like to try to stay focused on it because I think this is such an important issue, and I want people to feel they can ask and get face to face with commissioner and get as many questions answered as they possibly can. I would also ask you, since I wouldn't have the capability to broadcast it, is to the extent you can and have the availability to come and record it and
Yeah,
make it
I think
available so it can get posted, because I think this is important. I think every opportunity for not just myself, but every other commissioner to get out there and talk to the citizens about this is important. You all need to hear from us, and we need to make ourselves as available to all of you. It's easy to say, "Oh, just come to City Hall." Well, people got lives, and I get that. So I am committed to spending from September right through the election time, and at early voting at Biscayne, probably it'll be. I will make myself available there. Again, to answer questions regarding this ballot issue. I just think it's that important, and I think everything each of us can do to answer people's questions, interact, have dialogue over this subject, the better chance we have of garnering the support we need to do this. And hopefully come November, things will work out.
Well, we've got another event tonight. Uh, don't forget about the Northport Forward United Tour. That is where Jerome Fletcher, our city manager, goes out, spends about the first 15, 20 minutes giving an overview, and then spends another, gosh, I want to say up to an hour with Q&A directly with the citizens of Northport and surrounding areas. Believe it or not, I've been there. I've seen people from unincorporated Sarasota County, because a lot of decisions happen uh, with right across the street or right down the road. So they're involved in our community, but they do show up. So I would encourage everyone who hasn't been to go. It is very educational. I think you'll pick up a lot of information coming from a different source. I'm a firm believer that you have to listen to staff, you have to listen to commissioners, you have to make your own determination, and you have to be like the rest of us out here that drill down and ask questions and demand change. So you have to have the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I'm not calling anybody ugly. What I'm saying is sometimes the groundwork is the ugly work. So we have to have people who play the ground game too. But the one thing I will say about Robin and Chuck and the like is let's change the narrative of how we present as citizens and stop pot shotting people and start acting like adults and present well. I think the more you command respect, the more you'll get respect. I think those who are taking pot shots deserve exactly that back, because nobody is getting rich in this town being a commissioner. Nobody is rich in this town right now sitting on staff or as a city manager. It is not an easy job. There are things I don't like. There are things I voice my opinion about. But guess what? I don't treat anyone with anything but respect. And, sometimes you have to take the good and the bad, the ugly, and find another friend.
Hey,
But,
to pile on, John, I would
yep.
say Robin, Chuck, Pam, a group of people who have been pretty diligent about attending meetings and making their voices heard.
Yep.
I encourage you, light a fire under all those people you know as well to do the same. This is so important, as are so many of our decisions that are, and so many of the challenges we're facing over these next couple of years. Get people involved. We want to hear your opinions. We have started to show a pattern whereby people should take comfort that we listen. Mineral Springs is an example. This is an example. ULDC is an example. People may not get everything they want, but they are getting heard, and we do try to accommodate where it makes sense to. So please, thank you, Robin, and thank you, Chuck, and all of you who speak out and step up. We want that. We encourage it. We need to know what you think, and we appreciate it because we know you care.
Well, thank you so much, Bill, for being on. It is officially 4:15. So we kind of blew the doors off at 4 o'clock, but I'm glad you were here. I hope everybody enjoyed it. Make sure you check out your candidates. There are candidate forums coming up. I am going to film one of them. If you can't go, it will be live and recorded, and it will be all over social media. I've already made arrangements for that. And Pam Kotar, she 100% is bought into what I'm doing and trying to get the information out, as is the city and the citizens who come up and say something. It is vital that we get information flowing, whether it be this venue or check out the city's page, check out all the videos that they put out. We have got to embrace communication, and you've got to get yourself educated and show up at a meeting. You'll never know who your best friend might turn out to be at one of those meetings, and participate, whether it's online or in person. The funny thing is I said the other day, I said, I was listening. They said, I didn't see you. And I said, you don't have to. I was watching online. The truth is, you can watch online. You can watch after hours. You don't have to watch it live. Like my show, you don't have to watch it live. Watch it later. Here's the most important part about this whole thing. Share it. Share the information. Don't hide it. Don't not post it. If you're hanging in a group that doesn't post any of this content, shame on them. They're ostriches. They just need to yell pop. Because you can't get better than this. You can't get Q&A. You can't ignore the fact that everyone at City Hall is 100% trying to answer questions. Nothing ever gets done with no communication. You may not like it. You may not like the answer. But the funny thing, the ordinance isn't going to change unless there's a first and second reading. And things are going to change only because people are involved. So get involved. Stay positive. Get involved. And voice your opinion, because as a citizen, if you don't, nobody knows you're talking. There you go. You guys have a great day. Phil, thank you so much, buddy. I appreciate you.
My pleasure, John. You have a good day.
You do the same, partner. Bye-bye.
Thank you.